You're locked in, and I'm your host, Algenon Cash. Welcome back. Thank y'all for joining me. Yes, another, hopefully another great discussion. I think so. I think I've got something great lined up for you guys. Election 2020, I continue to tell you, I don't know, this is the never ending election. Still not quite over yet. We still got ballots being counted in states across the country, and still hearing about certain wins, not only in the House, but still waiting to hear about a Senate race or two Senate races actually down in Georgia. And as we all know, the president is fighting tooth and nail all the way to the end. He has not given up yet and believes that he may have some legal right to contest this election. Actually, before I came up live with you guys tonight, I actually heard that a court in Pennsylvania actually ruled in the president's favor. One of the things that's being contested right now is whether or not these states had the authority and right to be able to allow a waiver of the witness signature on these absentee ballots. And that's something that the president had contested. And it sounds like a judge in Pennsylvania has ruled in his favor, at least on that particular measure. I know they are still contesting also the ballots that were associated with coming in after the deadline. The Board of Elections allowed that in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, at least two states that I know about. So, we'll see how this all works out. I mean, this is a small win for the president. People said he had no evidence. I guess he just proved some evidence that he's got something going. So we'll see. We don't know how many ballots are actually in question with the ones that I just mentioned. Obviously not enough to overturn the Pennsylvania election. I don't think the 10,000 ballots that are in question, the ones that came in after the deadline, I don't think that'll be enough either. But we'll just see how far this all goes and see how far we stay in election 2020. But but today though, for my conversation, I've got two good friends on, two minority ladies too, to talk about the election. I think this is going to be really interesting. I think I know some things about these ladies that my audience may not know. It's going to shock some of you guys as we get into this conversation. But I've got Joyce Rice, who is a business development expert, has done some work in banking and finance, also workforce development here in Greensboro, North Carolina, and also Zuleima, who is an immigration advocate, paralegal, and former resident of Winston-Salem, now living in the big Washington, D.C. I know her as Z, so I'm going to take a little bit of license since this is my show to just call her Z, so I don't have to try to keep forcing myself around the Zulema thing. But is that okay, Z? Can I do that?
Yes, you may.
That's fine. Awesome. All right, Z, how's it going in DC right now? The election is still somewhat trolling along. I know I've been hearing about some protests outside the White House, and how's the attitude up there right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And DC has been interesting. Right now, there's a lot of road closures due to a lot of protesting. I don't know if you saw in the news, a lot of the businesses have put up the wood in front of their windows, their entrances, just to kind of protect themselves in case of any riots or any protests here in DC. Closures, also a lot of dancing and protesting and outside of the White House. So I intend to stay away from DC for right now. They've closed some of the roads, so we'll see. We'll see tomorrow how everything goes. But definitely, there's a lot going on in DC at the moment. It's hard to get into DC, just in general, since the election.
A lot of activity, it sounds like. Well, and the activity that you see in DC right now, is that on both sides? I mean, is that one side or the other? Is the level of emotion higher on one side or the other? I mean, how would you describe that?
We've seen a lot of, there actually was a truck, like a moving company that was going around DC, just, insinuating, that, Trump needs to get out of the office and, he's fired. There were a lot of signs, a lot of posters, more so, from a liberal perspective rather than, Trump supporters. I also saw on Facebook, around some of the parent groups here, there were people selling hats, we're making America great again, and there were blue hats. So there's a lot of activity going on.
Oh man, Sounds incredible. Sounds incredible.
Right.
Joyce, how you doing? There you go.
I'm doing wonderful. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing good. Doing good. Thank you
I'm doing
for
great.
joining us. Thank you for joining us for this. Joyce and I've been friends for a while. The world of Facebook is really interesting nowadays. You can be friends with someone for a very long time and not particularly know it. And so we've actually just started talking. I actually never met in person, but was fascinated with some of the ideas and thoughts that she was sharing with me, and sort of wanted to bring her in for this discussion. So we're going to jump into it because I've only got limited time, and I got some questions I want to get out there. And for the audience that is joining us, thank you for joining us. But also put your questions out there. If you got questions or comments, please leave them. I would love to work them into our conversation as we sort of proceed forward. Um, so I want to start with just a really simple question. I mean, we're coming off the election. The biggest question out there that you hear about at the water cooler is, who did you support in the election? And so I want to start with you, Z. I think I know the answer to this question, but who did you support in the election, in the presidential election? Obviously, big ballot, but presidential election.
Well, of course, I went Democrat. Just based on the advocacy that I've done over the last several years, especially when I started early in college, and I was doing some lobbying and activism, particularly with students and the Latino community. Civic education. I supported the Democratic Party during this election.
So is that all the way through the ticket, not just president, but all the way down to even some local races up there? Or
Yes, yes. I do want to mention that even though I supported the Democratic Party, I did not vote. I am actually one of the over 800,000 dreamers of this nation. And so my role was mostly civic education to my communities, making sure people that needed to vote were out there voting. They knew how to register. It was more of a educative perspective that the role that I took on during this election. I didn't vote, but I did do my part as an educated individual in the community, and so I did support the party, but I also was open to whatever perspective all of the my community had. I listened to all of their concerns and everything they had in mind as far as each candidate for each party.
that's interesting. Interesting. So you, in your mind, you feel like obviously the Democratic Party aligns with the best interest of immigration reform and some of those key issues that you feel like are most important to you.
Right.
How did you feel about? I mean, Trump was someone. Obviously, you didn't vote for Trump, but Trump was someone who really didn't hide his position on immigration when he was running for office. I mean, he was pretty clear about how he felt about. And when I say immigration, I think Trump. If Trump was participating in this conversation, he'd probably say illegal immigration. How he felt about illegal immigration. He was very clear about it. Said that he was going to ban Muslims on day one. And I think maybe perhaps when he was on the campaign trail, a lot of people didn't believe he was going to do these things, but he went about doing these things. I mean, he did everything he said he was going to do. Now, he hasn't built the entire wall that he described, but he has built stretches of it. How did you feel as someone that's in that space after hearing the rhetoric, but then also seeing it come to realization, but the president not really facing a lot of blowback from it?
You feel powerless because like I said, I'm one of the DACA participants. So when I saw the threat of the program ending without any other option for a legal status in the country, you feel threatened. You feel like you have an uncertain future. You don't know what's going to happen with your family. I have two U.S. citizen children, and when he threatened to completely end the program, it was like, all right, what's going to happen? My work permit's gonna expire. When do I, like, if I renew, will I be in deportation proceedings? All of these gray areas just kind of left me uncertain of, what I was going to do once it was expired or once it was ended. So I think that as part of the immigrant community, you feel insecure. You feel like, I've been here my whole life. I went to school here. I struggled to get to school. And, she's going to end this program. Like, what's going to happen to me and my family? If I go back to my home country, what am I going to do there? So a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people kind of reached out to me to, ask me questions. A lot of these DACA recipients were like, should I renew? Should I not? What's going to happen? Will I get deported if I put in my information? So it caused a lot of chaos, a lot of, insecurities. So it was certainly, during his administration, it was kind of like, we were kind of like in limbo because you didn't know what was going to happen the next day. It was just mostly that, just insecurity and just being uncertain of what was next for you, just generally speaking.
Well, yeah, I've seen some of that and read some stories about how, even just going down the street to go, grab, go hit the local McDonald's. I mean, you're terrified that you're going to get pulled over, for some type of traffic stop and, end up getting deported. So it's very, very interesting. If you're just now joining us, you are locked in. I'm Algenon Cash. You're listening to Zuleima, and she's an immigration advocate, but she's also a paralegal and a small business owner. I don't know where she finds time to sleep. She's got 2 little boys that keeps her busy as well. And she's based up in the DC area. And we're just having a conversation about, their reaction, her reaction to the presidential election. And so, Joyce, I want to bring you into the conversation because I think this is a bit interesting. African-American female, business background. And you're someone, well, I won't say it for you, but who'd you vote for?
I voted for President Donald J. Trump for 2 terms. I did.
That's interesting. And I say it's interesting only, it's interesting because when I think about the election itself, and then also when I think about, typically the role that African-American voters play within the Democratic Party. Overwhelmingly, Black voters typically vote with the Democratic Party. But then when you even look within the Black voter population, overwhelmingly it's women, driven by women. And then, certainly second is men. So, I think Trump maybe carried just around 10% African-American women. We're still trying to figure that out. This is just based on early exit polls. It'll take a year or two of analyzing some data before we fully know. But, we believe that Biden carried African-American women by around 90%. What was it that made you want to reelect President Donald Trump?
And I hate to do this, and I'm not going to bring his name up a lot because I don't think that's fair. But during the second term of Obama's administration, I think was the point at which I began to shift. As you know, most African-American families are conservative in their core values. Historically, we are connected to the Christian community, if you will. So we're naturally raised just with a set of values that are familiar to us. I think that when we shift into the political landscape, as you can see, you don't see that narrative in how we vote. One of the big things for me in shifting to support a Republican agenda was the core values. The core values really aligning with what the agenda was. So I wanted to align my vote and express my view in a way that matched, my core values. So that was the first thing that really intrigued me about voting for Donald Trump. Additionally, I'm an entrepreneur. I think that every person could benefit from starting a business and running a business. So Z, I can relate to what you're doing, and I highly respect what you're doing, even in your position. Because as an entrepreneur, you have to you understand capitalism. You understand the free marketplace. You understand that you have to generate and produce the product that you're selling. You have to identify a market for that. You have to manage inventory, and you have to keep your business afloat. And I think coming from an entrepreneur standpoint, I could understand a lot of what Trump was trying to do for the country, economically speaking. So for me, I was able to set aside a lot of the personality challenges that most Americans had. Let's be honest. He may not have been the most popular and favorable from a political standpoint. He wasn't very politically correct, but I was certainly intrigued by the agenda of getting back to core values of our country, as well as some key values, economically speaking, foreign trade. I loved what where the economy moved to in terms of the unemployment rate and manufacturing companies coming back to our country. So there are just a number of things that moved me to vote for him again a second term. And I really wanted to see how things played out. I really did. And it became more difficult because there was a lot of noise, Algenon, with regards to, there were just a lot of different things that were being done and said that really detracted from what he was trying to do and his impact. But I stayed focused, and I still committed to vote for him again. So that's essentially what brought me to my decision.
It's interesting. So what I'm hearing when you say all that is the positions and the policies around economic policy, his positions around entrepreneurship, and then from your perspective and paradigm, even his focus on values and those kind of things were the things that moved you in that direction. And so that was enough for you to ignore some of what would be described as the bombastic behavior that we've seen going back to 2016. So help us understand this, because you hear this you hear this phrase and this question a lot where, you know, Donald Trump just isn't presidential. He's just not presidential.
I agree with that.
In your mind, is that a requirement for the president? I mean, should the president be presidential? I mean,
I think that I think you have to look at the presidency like this. What are the outcomes that he wants to accomplish? You have to take into account the climate of our nation. You have to take into account things are happening on a social landscape as well as an economic landscape. And I believe that things began to really unravel. And I believe you begin to see a greater divide toward this latter, the latter part of his first term. And I do believe there was so much opportunity that was missed. I believe there was a great opportunity that was missed to curtail some of that personality, to pull some of those voters that may have been undecided, or individuals that really just didn't support his agenda or support his personality. I don't necessarily think you have to be completely politically correct to be effective as president to run this country, but that's going to depend on the prism from which you stand. I think that when you look at the landscape of this country, for example, if you look at Z's perspective, there are a whole set of things that carry more weight for her possibly than gross domestic product. You follow me? Whereas when you look at the African American community, we needed, and I say we because I am African American, and I don't disenfranchise myself from the plight and the concerns of the African American community, but the way that I applied what was important to me in my decision was just different than others. But when you look at the African American community, we needed to see more empathy, we needed to see more acknowledgement, and we needed to see more bridge building and a little bit more articulation behind how certain things would be addressed directly from him. And that was unfortunate, because for me as a person who did support him, I saw so much opportunity. When you look at the term "Make America Great Again," that is a term that infuriates people. It has infuriated people. I have looked at that slightly different. And again, it just depends on where you're coming from. So in some cases, you have to be savvy, diplomatic, and you have to have a level of humility, to really decide what battles are you going to fight, where are you going to concede, and how your actions can impact your effectiveness. And in this case, he really wanted to get in another term. And I just think that may have been a few opportunities that he missed that caused him to not, win this thing clear, more objectively. Because I know that we're still counting votes right now.
You bring in the race thing, and just one other question before I really want to try to bring both of you guys back together. And again, if you're watching, thank you for joining us. You're locked in. I'm Algenon Cash. You're listening right now. You're listening to Joyce Rice. She's a business development expert. And would it be fair to describe you as a Black conservative? Is that so? Are you conservative? Okay. All right.
Absolutely. So I'm awesome. I'm a Christian first. I'm a conservative next, and I'm a Republican voter. It's about the agenda more than the person.
And we're having a conversation about the presidential election, and these two women are reacting to that. You brought up the point about race, and if you go back and look at polls prior to the election, 87% of Black voters disapproved of Donald Trump's job, his performance. 83% of Black voters believe that Donald Trump's a racist. Do you agree with those perspectives, and why?
Again, when you take a look at what's important to you in this country as a member of this country, as a citizen of this country, and you look at Donald Trump and his agenda and his goals and what you're expecting him to accomplish, his past, his mistakes may not be as important as what he's able to accomplish in the current situation. I don't turn a blind eye to the notion that some of his decisions or maybe some of his comments have been possible suspect towards either being racist or insensitive at the very least. From my point of view, I'm concerned about, are you making decisions that are going to put African Americans in a better position? Are you making decisions that are going to create better opportunities for African Americans, for all citizens? I believe that the more we can see ourselves as Americans, the more we can be a little bit more united. I think that we too often use a classification of race when it comes to making decisions and where we align politically. We too often use the classification of race. If we take the approach of being American and we take the approach of what will make the country healthier economically speaking, and how will this then trickle down to impact our communities? Are there going to be more jobs? Will there be more training opportunities? Will there be opportunities for people to get more education and therefore start more businesses and impact their individual communities? I think that's the approach.
Yeah. All right. So here's where I want to try to go with this. This is interesting because as I listen to both you guys describe, the reasons why you voted the way you voted, what I heard was, really two different perspectives on what's most important to me. And obviously from Z's perspective, the immigration component is critically important. And it sounds like from Joyce's perspective, the economic piece is critically important. So Z, I want to come back to you because you're a big supporter, big Democrat supporter. Democrats projected they were going to get this blue wave. Some of the things that you described that was really important to you was placed in some of the messaging of what Democrats used across the country in a lot of races. And it looks like, at least where we stand right now, Republicans are picking up 9 House seats. Democrats most likely won't have a majority control of the Senate, depending on what happens in Georgia. But then you had this really outperformance, obviously, at the top of the ballot with Biden. What, for someone like you, and you've been around immigration reform for quite some time, what does that tell you about the mood of the country and where people are?
Well, I think that for the majority of, I guess, the immigrant community or minorities, we kind of want to see some changes socially, right? We're more worried about the racism that, President Trump's agenda brought upon. I mean, racism was there. He just gave permission for people to freely express it. So it's not like he brought racism into this country. It already existed. It just gave people freedom to be more expressive about it. And so at this point, I think people are more hopeful that, the nation kind of comes together and we reconstruct various, I want to say, civic components of the nation, social issues that are happening. And, from my point of view, as far as immigration, I know that a lot of minorities are hoping that, the president acknowledges that, the core value or the one of the aspirations for the future of the U.S. is the immigrants. And so, I am hoping, and we're all very hopeful that with this new administration, the immigrant community will have more opportunities when it comes to, opportunities here in the country, our American dream overall. And that comes with reconstruction of the immigration system, access to education. I went to an HBCU and, I had a great education. And so I want to be sure that, HBCUs and any other, universities have the same access as any other state university. And so I think that that's kind of where we are. We're hoping for a little bit more social change, especially for low-income people in the community, that everyone has the same opportunity for success, regardless of any kind of economic advantages that you may have. And that we don't have any restrictions. Like I said, in my case, you know, it took me a year to get into college, not because of my grades, but it was because of my immigration status when I graduated high school. And so when I was attempting to get into colleges, I got an acceptance letter, but I had to pay 3 times the tuition of an in-state student. And so it took me a whole year to pretty much, you know, fight myself into college. And I finally got admitted. I graduated without any kind of federal aid. And so not everybody is lucky enough to have, you know, family help, to have access to flexible jobs to be able to access education. And so we are hoping that with this new administration, more people will have those resources and be able to access good education for the betterment of our community overall. Because when you have educated people in your community, you know, you have a safer community, you have successful people, economy goes up. So it's a you know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's critically important. Yeah, but I want to bring something else in, because you know I'm thinking about, you know, sort of the same scenario that I described with Joyce, where, you know, surprisingly Trump increased his support base with African American voters from 2016 to this most recent election, which you wouldn't have thought. You know, if you look at the polls, if you listen to some of the rhetoric and the behavior, you wouldn't think that he would have grown his support, but he also grew his support with Hispanics as well. And specifically, if you look down in Florida, where a lot of Hispanics really also believe more in the economic message that Joyce talked about. So when you say we, and you say we want these things, but how do you also describe how would you describe the fact that maybe there's a difference of thought there? I mean, maybe it's not a monolithic thought when it comes to immigration.
Can I add one thing whenever you finish, Z?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that that comes down to kind of like the relation that Latinos have among themselves, right? A lot of the Latino support, obviously, you know, came from, you know, states like Florida, where you have a lot of Cuban Latinos who move, you know, they moved mostly Republican, just based on, you know, their past experiences, how they actually became, you know, naturalized and everything. You also have to realize that a lot of the Latinos, you know, you got to take a look at their incomes and where their positions are. Kind of like with Joy, you know, her position was more so on the economic component. And so I think that that had a lot to do with it. Like myself, you know, being a tax consultant, you know, I saw a lot of prosperity when it came to tax breaks during the Trump administration. So, you know, I think that a lot of that had to do with that. And so honestly, that's why I think the increase in the voter turnout happened. As well as, you know, when President Obama came into presidency, you know, he promised a lot of things, and without knowing the burdens that he would have during his presidency. I mean, how many times did he attempt to pass a comprehensive immigration reform, and he just couldn't pass it? And so, you know, at some point, a lot of the Hispanic voters became they stopped believing in, you know, what Democrats could do, or, you know, or whatever. And then you add on to that, you know, the whole during the Trump era, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of I want to say economic help for some of these Latinos with businesses. So I think that all of those things put together kind of increased the Hispanic vote turnout.
No, and Joyce, real quick, because I'm running out of time, like 10 seconds. React. Go ahead.
If that's even possible. No, I empathize with what you're saying. I just wanted to add a point that when you're looking at the overall landscape of, you know, government programs, you look at government as an allocation of resources. And so, for example, you know, you have well over 500,000, I guess, illegal immigrants, if you will, here just in the last year or so. And when you look at allocating resources and budgeting, having that under control is really important. And it's more about, I think, the management of resources and serving folks as opposed to not wanting more of a racial thing, so you have to look at the allocation of resources and what is the financial implication of that many undocumented immigrants coming to the country without being able to manage those resources.
Yeah, and it certainly has a big impact on public services and those kind of things. But I think, from Z's perspective, and I also would agree with this, we do need comprehensive reform. I think too often we allow the discussion about immigration to only focus at the southern border. We don't think about the fact that we have a broken immigration system for so many other talented people too around the world who want to relocate here and have talent, and they go to school here. And we certainly have talented people to the southern border that also want to come here and share their skills. And we need to figure out how to create that pathway. And it's interesting because I think that Republicans have an opportunity to lead on that issue. That is something that President Bush wanted to do even when he was in office, but was not able to get that through Congress. And subsequently, I think Obama tried to do it as well. So this has been an interesting discussion. I mean, I wish I had a lot more time. It always goes fast. But I want to try to do this again. I'm going to keep you guys' name on the short list. And, we may get you guys back on to do this again really, really quick because I'm pretty much out of time. Tell my audience how they can get in touch with you. I'll go with you, Z, first.
Well, you can reach me on Facebook, Z Liz Villa. You can reach me on there. I also I do run a preschool, Little Rising Stars Daycare Center in North Virginia. Or you can reach me through Mi Gente Taxes, which is a new tax office that we opened up this year. We do tax consulting and accounting. So Mi Gente Taxes on Facebook, just look for me there. Or you can just send me a personal message. I'll send you my contact information for any kind of consults, whether it's paralegal work, immigration, tax, or education consulting. Just send me a direct message.
Joyce, what about you?
Sure. You can find me here on Facebook, Joyce Rice, NBA. You can also find me on Instagram at Bound to Excel. And you can also find me on one of my blog pages here on Facebook, the Entrepreneur Blog. Just send me an inbox if you ever have any questions about strategic planning, startup business planning, or business development. Certainly happy to extend my services.
Awesome. And I would encourage both of you all when we get off, go check out the, obviously there'll be a recording or a video of this on the Facebook page. It was quite active, so you may want to go check out some of the comments and some of the questions. People were very engaged with your conversation. And my friend Janae Adams said, special shout out to the Dreamers. And Jeffrey Odom, who was watching, also said good to hear when he heard that Joyce was a Black conservative. So y'all go check that out. And to my audience,
nice to meet you, Z.
Yeah, thank y'all also for locking in with me. And to my audience, thank y'all for locking in. If you haven't already done so, go check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber. A lot of content going on there. We do need to catch up. I'll be honest with you, we're a little behind over on YouTube. If you're not following me on Instagram, go check that out as well. And also, we've had some really interesting conversations all this week. Earlier this week, I sat down and talked with BJ Murphy, who was the CEO of Magic Mile Media, also the publisher of News and the North Carolina News Network. That video is available if you want to go check it out. We talked about the impact of media on elections. And just yesterday, I talked with Jeff Phillips, who's chairman of the Guilford County Board of Commissioners and also a small business owner in Greensboro. And we just talked about the county's response to COVID-19. And obviously, he is retiring as chairman. And so we just sort of look back over some of the years that he's been spending on the board. So lots of great things for you guys to talk about and go look at. Obviously, I will be back with you. Don't forget, on Monday, I've got a small business roundtable at noon. We got 2 conservative small business owners, 2 liberal small business owners. We're going to talk about how they voted in the election, let them react to what's going on right now. I think that's also going to be a really interesting discussion. So make plans to join us there live. And until then, y'all stay locked in.
Thank you.
Thank you.